She called my grid maps cave drawings and locked me out. I was the only person alive who understood how 4.2 million homes kept their lights on. She was about to find out what that meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The conference room smelled like old coffee and new furniture. Paige Drummond had redecorated it 2 weeks after arriving. Out went the old utility maps on the walls. In came frosted glass dividers and a 70-inch display cycling through slides about optimization cadence and agile infrastructure. The mahogany table stayed. Probably too heavy to move. I wasn't sitting at it. I'd been told the meeting was informational. So I stood along the wall with Marcus Reed and 2 junior engineers while Paige sat at the head, MacBook Pro open, manicured fingers moving across the trackpad like she was conducting something. Todd Bailey from HR stood behind her, 31 years old, holding a tablet against his chest like a shield, studying the ceiling tiles like they owed him money. Paige didn't look up when she said it. "We're moving past your kind of infrastructure, Dwayne. You built something functional. It just isn't scalable." She slid a manila folder across the table. Termination paperwork. I could see the Ridgewater logo through the cover page. "Your system credentials have been revoked as of 9:15 this morning," she said. "Building access will remain active through end of day Friday to allow you to collect personal items. Todd has the details on your separation package." Todd shifted his weight, still looking at the ceiling. Paige kept going. Something about legacy dependencies. Something about digital-first thinking. She used the phrase legacy dependency twice in 4 sentences. She mentioned fresh slate thinking. She mentioned moving the needle. I picked up the folder, looked at it once, set it back down on the table. I understand. That was it. I didn't say this isn't fair. I didn't say you can't do this to me. I didn't say I built this grid from the ground up while you were still in middle school, which was true, but beside the point. I unclipped my badge. The one with 26 years of scratch marks on the plastic. Little gouges from being swiped through readers at substations at 3 a.m., from being dropped on gravel at relay sites, from being worn through thunderstorms and ice events, and one tornado that knocked out the Western Corridor for 9 days. I set it on the table next to the folder. Marcus wouldn't look at me. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much and didn't trust his face. I walked out of the conference room at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and the door clicked shut behind me. Click. If you've ever had a boss or been in a situation like this, hit that like button and subscribe. My name is Dwayne Allen Carver. I'm 50 years old. And until about 2 minutes ago, I was the director of grid operations at Ridgewater Energy, a utility company serving 4.2 million residential customers across 6 states and generating $6.8 billion in annual revenue. I never went to college, never served in the military. What I did was spend 6 years on oil rigs in the Permian Basin, starting at 18, where I learned 2 things that every degree program in the country fails to teach. First, systems don't care about your title. They care about whether you understand load, tolerance, and failure points. Second, the guy who actually knows how the thing works will always be more valuable than the guy who knows how to talk about how it works. I joined Ridgewater as a lineman at 24, youngest on the crew by 3 years, oldest in experience that mattered by about a decade, because working rigs in West Texas at 19 will age your judgment faster than anything a classroom can simulate. Within 3 years, I was writing configuration scripts for the SCADA network. Not because anyone asked me to, because the existing system kept throwing fault errors during peak load events, and nobody else seemed curious about why. By year 5, I was redesigning the load balancing architecture across the Western Corridor. By year 7, I had built the inter-system fault tolerance logic that connected 3 generations of hardware into a single grid that didn't go down. Didn't go down. For 26 years, that grid served 4.2 million homes and did not go dark. Not during the ice storms of 2011. Not during the wildfire summer of 2018. not during the demand surge of the pandemic. And the reason it didn't go dark was not because of the hardware. Hardware fails. Relays trip. Transformers blow. The reason it didn't go dark was because I built the logic that told the system what to do when hardware failed, and I was always the one sitting at the console when it happened. I kept a hand-drawn schematic of the original grid topology taped inside my locker. My first draft. It looked like something you'd find in a high school notebook. Lines and arrows and margin notes in pencil. I'd been meaning to digitize it for 20 years. Never got around to it. The system I built was proprietary, hand-coded across 3 hardware generations, modified in real time during live events, documented in one place. My head. That's not ego. That's what happens when a utility deprioritizes documentation for 20 years because the guy who built it is always there to explain it. They never asked me to write it down, and I never had a reason to, because I was the documentation. Every protocol, every workaround, every fault tolerance parameter coded into every intersystem load balancing node existed in my memory and in the master control system. The master control system Paige locked me out of at 9:15 a.m. I got promoted to Director of Grid Operations 12 years ago, when I was 38. The promotion came the same way every promotion in my career came. Someone above me insisted I was the only person who understood how the grid actually worked. I never wrote a resume. Not once. Not in 26 years. The promotion cost me my marriage. Sandra, my ex-wife, she's a dental hygienist in Tulsa now. Remarried. Goes by Sandra Holloway. The divorce finalized 11 years ago, a year after I took the director title. She said she was tired of being a widow to a power grid. I didn't argue with her because she wasn't wrong. I pay her $1,400 a month in alimony. 14 months left on that. My son Caleb is 19, sophomore at Texas, A&M, studying electrical engineering. Lives in campus housing in College Station. Comes to see me summers and winter break. Good kid. Smart. We have the kind of relationship where you can feel the warmth and the distance at the same time, and neither of us pretends the distance isn't there. I missed his baseball games. I missed school plays. I missed the call when Sandra told him they were splitting up because I was at a substation in New Mexico dealing with a relay cascade at 2 a.m. I built a grid that kept 4.2 million homes lit. I couldn't keep my own house together. That's the trade. Nobody tells you about it in the interview. There is no interview. You just keep showing up until the system can't function without you. And by the time you realize what you've given up, the giving is already done. Now let me tell you about Paige Drummond. She's 26 years old, graduated Northwestern Kellogg School of Management 18 months before she walked into my building. Before that, she spent 9 months as a digital transformation consultant at a boutique firm in Chicago that primarily worked with mid-size retail companies, clothing stores, restaurant chains, businesses where a system failure means someone can't buy a sweater, not that someone's grandmother loses heat in February. She married Preston Drummond 8 months before joining Ridgewater. Preston is 29, Hank Drummond's only son, and he manages the family foundation. Nice enough guy. No operational role, no interest in having one. But his father Hank, the founder, 71 years old, majority shareholder, in failing health, and increasingly detached from day-to-day decisions, handed his new daughter-in-law a budget, a title, and a reorganization mandate. The board approved it 5-2 without reading the operational impact assessment. Nobody asked me. Her official title was VP of Digital Transformation. She put Chief Digital Officer on her email signature anyway. First thing she did was audit grid operations. 6 weeks before she fired me, she sat in a department presentation and looked at my hand-drawn grid maps, the ones I'd been using to train new technicians for 2 decades, and said, in front of my entire team, "Are these cave drawings?" She laughed. A couple of the new hires laughed. Marcus didn't. The room got quiet in the way rooms get quiet when someone has said something they don't understand the weight of. 3 weeks later, she called me an institutional bottleneck in a memo I wasn't copied on, but that Marcus showed me anyway. She described my role as a single point of failure, the humankind. She used the phrase analog mindset in a sentence about my 26 years of operational experience. And then, on Tuesday morning, she revoked my credentials, slid a folder across the table, and called what I built a legacy dependency. I stood in the parking garage for maybe 4 minutes, sat in my truck. Rain was hitting the windshield. Not hard, just enough to blur the building. I didn't call my lawyer. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call anyone. I sat there thinking about what Paige Drummond didn't know, what she couldn't know, because she'd never once asked me how the system actually worked. She'd audited it. She'd assessed it. She'd presented slides about it to a board that nodded along, but she never asked me. I started the truck, pulled out of the garage, drove to the diner on Route 14, the one with the vinyl booths and the waitress who's been there longer than I've been at Ridgewater. Ordered black coffee, sat in the booth by the window, and I waited. If you've ever had a boss who thought a title meant they understood the job, hit that like button and subscribe. I sat in that booth for 2 hours, drank 3 cups of coffee, ate a grilled cheese I didn't taste, left a $12 tip on a $6 check because Donna, the waitress, had the decency not to ask me why I was sitting alone on a Tuesday morning looking like I'd just been told something I already knew. I drove home, fed the dog, sat on the back deck with the phone on the railing, and watched the clouds move east toward Oklahoma. I didn't make calls. I didn't send emails. I didn't draft a legal threat or type up a furious LinkedIn post about loyalty and betrayal. I did nothing, and I did it on purpose. See, here's what Paige Drummond didn't understand. She thought firing me was a personnel decision. Headcount reduction. Line item. She looked at my salary, $187,000 a year, and my age, 50, and my alimony obligation, $1,400 a month with 14 months remaining, and she did what people like her always do. She built a story. The story said, Dwayne Carver is an aging, overpaid, financially trapped operator who will take his severance, sign his NDA, and disappear quietly because he has no other options. That story made sense if you'd never read a NERC compliance filing in your life. Paige hadn't. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation doesn't care about your MBA, doesn't care about your optimization cadence or your fresh slate thinking. NERC cares about one thing. Can you keep the grid from going dark? And can you prove it with documentation, credentials, and named personnel? Ridgewater Energy had been filing NERC compliance documents for 14 years. Reliability Standard FAC001. Emergency Operating Procedure EOP0053. Every filing required the utility to name a qualified system operator of record for emergency restoration procedures. Every filing, for 14 consecutive years, listed the same name, Dwayne Allen Carver, Director of Grid Operations. Those filings were federal, notarized. On record with NERC's Atlanta Regional Office, filed most recently 7 months ago on the Form 3 Operating Personnel Credential Submission. My certification number, my credentials, my name. You can't change it retroactively. You can't undo it with a Tuesday morning reorganization meeting and a manila folder. Paige didn't know this because Paige never asked. She audited the hardware. She assessed the org chart. She never once opened a NERC filing, and nobody on her team told her to, because nobody on her team had ever worked at a utility before. The other thing Paige didn't know was simpler and worse. The fault tolerance parameters I hand-coded into the intersystem load balancing nodes were not documented. Not in a manual, not in a file, not on a server. The logic that told 3 generations of hardware how to talk to each other during a cascade event, the logic that had prevented every blackout for 26 years, lived in two places: the master control system, which she'd locked me out of, and my head, which she'd just walked out the door. I sat on my deck and watched a hawk circle the tree line behind my property. Didn't check my phone. Didn't need to. I knew what was coming. Not because I'm psychic, because I understand load. When you remove the fault tolerance logic from a grid running at 78% peak capacity across 6 states, you don't get an immediate failure. You get a slow bleed. The system compensates. Backup relays absorb the overshoot. Transfer switches cycle faster than designed. Everything looks stable on the surface. For a while. 4 hours. That's the number. I knew it the way a rig hand knows how long a pipe joint will hold under torque before the threads strip. Not because someone taught me. Because I'd tested it. Lived it. Rebuilt it at 3 a.m. in an ice storm with my fingers numb and Marcus handing me tools by flashlight. 4 hours and 7 minutes to be exact. Minutes. At 1:22 p.m. on Tuesday, 4 hours and 7 minutes after Paige revoked my credentials, the Western Corridor Relay Network started throwing cascading fault errors. The load balancing nodes couldn't interpret the fault tolerance parameters without the custom handshake protocols I'd coded into them, and the system started doing what any system does when it can't talk to itself. It guessed, and it guessed wrong. By 3 p.m., the Eastern Transfer Grid was cycling at 140% rated capacity. By 4:30, automatic load shedding protocols kicked in, but the shedding algorithm couldn't prioritize correctly because it relied on my configuration tables, which were locked behind credentials that no longer existed under my name. The system started shedding load randomly. That's not a technical term. That's the reality. It started turning off power to neighborhoods the way you'd shuffle a deck of cards. By 6:44 p.m., rolling blackouts were hitting 3 of Ridgewater's 6 service states. 1.3 million customers. I know that number because Marcus texted it to me at 7:12 p.m. Just the number. No commentary. I read it. Set the phone down. Made dinner. Scrambled eggs and toast. Fed the dog the last piece of crust. Paige, meanwhile, was in the operations center she'd never set foot in before, standing behind technicians she'd never spoken to, asking questions that revealed the full depth of what she didn't know. Marcus told me later that she kept saying, "Reboot the system," like the grid was a laptop. She told the senior engineers to find the workaround, without understanding that I was the workaround. I had been the workaround for 26 years. At 8 p.m. Tuesday, the outside vendor Paige had hired as my replacement, a cloud infrastructure firm based in Austin with zero utility experience, told her something that must have made the room go very quiet. "Ma'am, whoever built this, we're going to need them on the phone." She didn't call me until 9:47 p.m. I watched her name light up my screen. Let it ring 4 times. Set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. She called again at 10:15. Again at 10:44. Again at 11:08. Each time I watched the screen glow, then go dark. At 11:31 p.m., she posted on LinkedIn. I saw it the next morning, but Marcus screenshotted it in real time. The post read, "Tough decisions are part of real leadership. Growth requires letting go of what's comfortable." She posted that while 1.3 million homes sat in the dark. I went to bed at 11:45. Slept better than I had in months. The dog curled up at the foot of the bed, the way he does when he knows something has shifted, but doesn't know what. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Marcus, it's worse than they're telling the board. You need to see this." I read it. Didn't respond. Rolled over. At 4:45 a.m. Wednesday, Ellen Shaw, Ridgewater's general counsel, 58 years old, 14 years with the company, a woman who had signed off on my NERC credentials every quarter for over a decade, discovered 2 things simultaneously. First, NERC had formally opened a reliability investigation into Ridgewater Energy. Second, Ridgewater's insurance carrier had issued a coverage trigger warning, which meant the $230 million in projected penalties and emergency procurement costs might not be covered. Ellen pulled the NERC filings. She read the Form 3 Operating Personnel Credentials submission, filed 7 months ago, notarized on record with the Atlanta Regional Office. She read the name on line 14, Dwayne Allen Carver. She pulled Reliability Standard FAC-001. She pulled EOP-005-3. She read the requirement for documented emergency restoration procedures and qualified personnel capable of executing them. She checked Paige Drummond's credentials. Nothing. No NERC certification. No system operator designation. No emergency restoration qualification of any kind. She checked the rest of Paige's team. Nothing. She checked the outside vendor. Nothing. At 5 a.m. Wednesday, Ellen Shaw called Hank Drummond at his home. Hank answered on the 6th ring, voice thick with sleep and the particular confusion of a 71-year-old man whose body has been betraying him for 3 years. Hank, I need you at headquarters immediately. A pause. Your daughter-in-law signed something. Or rather, she didn't sign something. She fired the only person whose name is on our federal compliance filings, and NERC is now asking us who's running the grid. Silence on the line. Hank, we have a situation that cannot be resolved by anyone currently in this building. At 5:47 a.m., my phone rang again. Not Paige this time. Ellen Shaw. I looked at the screen for a long time. The dog lifted his head. Rain was tapping the bedroom window. Same quiet rain as the day before. Like the weather hadn't noticed that 1.3 million homes had gone dark since the last time it fell. I let it ring. Click. I picked up on the second call. Not because I was ready. I'd been ready since Tuesday morning. I picked up because Ellen Shaw had earned the courtesy of an answer. 14 years of quarterly sign-offs. 14 years of telling each other the truth when it was inconvenient. She'd never once called me at home. Dwayne. Her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a woman who'd been awake for 26 hours and had stopped pretending she wasn't furious about 4 hours ago. I'm not going to insult you by asking how you are. Appreciate that. NERC opened a reliability investigation at 4:45 this morning. Our insurance carrier issued a coverage trigger warning. The board is convening an emergency session at 7 a.m. The projected liability exposure is $230 million in penalties and emergency procurement costs, and that number is climbing every hour the grid stays unstable. I didn't say anything. Dwayne, your name is on every federal compliance filing this company has submitted for 14 years. You are the system operator of record under FAC-001 and EOP-005-3. NERC's first question to me at 4:45 this morning was who is qualified to execute emergency restoration procedures for this grid. The answer is you. The answer has always been you. I know. No one in this building can legally operate the grid under NERC standards without you. Paige is not certified. Her team is not certified. The outside vendor she hired has no utility credentials whatsoever. They told her at 8 p.m. last night that they couldn't read the system. I heard. A pause. I could hear her breathing. Could hear the hum of the Ridgewater operations center behind her. The low-grade chaos of people trying to solve a problem they didn't have the vocabulary for. The board needs you in that room at 7 a.m. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 5:52 a.m. Rain, still tapping the window. Ellen. Yes? I'll be there. But I want to do this right. She didn't ask what that meant. She was too smart to ask. She just said, I understand, and hung up. I showered, made coffee, black from the old drip machine on the counter, fed the dog, Stood at the kitchen window for 2 full minutes, watching the sky lighten over the tree line. Didn't rush. Didn't rehearse. I put on a clean shirt, the same kind of plain button-down I'd worn every day for 26 years, and I drove to Ridgewater headquarters at the speed limit. The parking lot at 6:40 a.m. looked like a hospital during a disaster. Cars everywhere. Lights on in every window. 2 news vans parked on the access road. A NERC compliance vehicle in the visitor lot with federal plates. Paige's BMW was in her reserve spot, still there from yesterday. I wondered if she'd gone home at all. I walked through the front entrance. The security guard, a man named Billings, who'd swiped me through that door for 19 years, looked at me, looked at his screen, looked back at me. "Mr. Carver, your badge was deactivated yesterday. I'm supposed to call Ellen Shaw." He called. 30 seconds later, I had a temporary badge and a security escort to the 7th floor. The escort wasn't for protection. It was procedure. I didn't mind. I'd walk these halls at 3 a.m. during ice storms. I could walk them one more time with a man in a blazer 2 steps behind me. The boardroom was on the 7th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Eastern Grid corridor, which, if you knew what you were looking at, you could almost see in the arrangement of transmission towers marching toward the horizon. Polished mahogany table, 20 feet long. 10 leather chairs. The room smelled like old coffee and sweat and something sharper underneath. Fear. The particular smell of people who have realized that the situation they created cannot be solved by the tools they understand. 7 board members were already seated. Hank Drummond sat at the far end in a chair that had been pulled slightly back from the table. Not quite at it. Not quite away. He wore a golf polo and khakis. He looked like he'd dressed in the dark. His face carried the gray weight of a man watching his legacy crack in real time. Ellen Shaw stood at the head of the table with a stack of documents and a projection screen showing NERC's investigation notice. She looked like she hadn't slept. She hadn't. Paige Drummond sat 3 chairs down on the right side. Her MacBook was open in front of her. Her posture was still perfect. Her face was not. The composure she'd worn on Tuesday morning had been replaced by something brittle. She'd been in that building for 22 hours, watching a system she didn't understand fail in ways she couldn't fix, fielding calls from state regulators and the NERC Atlanta office, and an insurance carrier that was already calculating how to deny coverage. She looked at me when I walked in. I didn't look at her, not out of spite, because she wasn't relevant to what happened next. There was an empty chair at the table, 3rd from the head on the left. A printed name card sat on the table in front of it. Dwayne Carver, system operator of record. Ellen had put it there. I sat down, set my coffee on the table, didn't open a laptop, didn't bring a folder, didn't bring anything. Ellen spoke first. She addressed the board with the clipped precision of a general counsel who knows the room has about 45 minutes before the next regulatory deadline. At 4:45 a.m. this morning, NERC formally opened a reliability investigation into Ridgewater Energy under standards F, AC-001 and EOP-005-3. Their first question was the identity of our qualified system operator of record for emergency restoration. Per every federal filing this company has submitted for 14 years. Per the Form 3 operating personnel credentials submission filed 7 months ago, notarized and on record with the Atlanta Regional Office, that person is Dwayne Carver. She let that sit. Paige Drummond is not NERC certified. No one on her team holds system operator credentials. The outside vendor retained to replace Mr. Carver's function has no utility sector certification. As of this moment, Ridgewater Energy is operating a 6-state grid in violation of federal reliability standards, with 1.3 million customers experiencing rolling blackouts across 3 states and a projected liability exposure of $230 million. Board member number 4, A man named Warren Hadley, who'd been on the board for 11 years, leaned forward. Ellen, in plain language, what are you telling us? I'm telling you that we cannot legally restore this grid without the man sitting in that chair. And we cannot legally operate this grid going forward without him or someone he certifies as a successor, which he has not done. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Paige opened her mouth. This is a staffing issue that can be resolved through... Ms. Drummond. Ellen didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. NERC is not asking about staffing. They are asking whether this utility has a federally qualified operator capable of executing emergency restoration. The answer is either Dwayne Carver or it is no one. There is no third option. Paige looked at the board. The vendor can be certified. We can accelerate. NERC certification for a system operator of record takes a minimum of 14 months of supervised training and examination, Ellen said. We have approximately 6 hours before NERC escalates this to a mandatory compliance order, which would authorize them to place Ridgewater under federal operational oversight. At that point, we do not control our own grid. Hank Drummond shifted in his pulled-back chair. He looked at Paige, then at me. Dwayne. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I let family cloud my business judgment. That's on me. I looked at him, 71 years old. Built this company from a 3-truck operation, running power lines in rural Texas. He wasn't a bad man. He was a tired man who loved his son and trusted his son's wife and stopped reading the documents that kept his company alive. I know Hank. Warren Hadley cleared his throat. Dwayne, what do you need to stabilize the grid? I took a sip of coffee. Set it down. Full credential restoration. Immediate. Full access to the master control system. My team, led by Marcus Reed, reinstated to their original roles without modification. The outside vendor off my operations floor within the hour. And I need everyone who isn't a grid technician to leave the operations center so my people can work. Done, Hadley said. I'm not finished. I said it the same way I'd say anything. Level. I want a new title. Chief Infrastructure Officer. Full authority over all operational hiring and termination decisions within grid operations. No reorganization of my department without my written approval. And I want to discuss compensation and retention terms with the board separately, after the grid is stable. Paige stood up. You can't just... This is extortion. He's leveraging a crisis. Sit down, Miss Drummond. That was board member number 6. Janet Collier. She didn't look at Paige when she said it. Paige didn't sit down. I was given a mandate by the founder to modernize this company's infrastructure. Every decision I made was within the scope of that mandate. If the grid is failing, it's because it was built on an undocumented system that was a single point of failure. That's not my fault. That's his. I looked at her then, first time since I'd walked in. You're right, I said. It is a single point of failure. I let that hang for exactly 2 seconds. And you fired it. The room went still. Ellen Shaw called the vote. Reinstatement of Dwayne Allen Carver to full operational authority. Creation of the Chief Infrastructure Officer position. Immediate termination of the Digital Transformation Initiative, pending full operational review. 7 board members present. Hank Drummond, who had been moved to an advisory role by unanimous board decision 40 minutes earlier, did not vote. 7-0. Paige Drummond's building access was revoked at 7:44 a.m. Wednesday morning. Billings, the same security guard who'd checked my deactivated badge 20 minutes earlier, walked her to the parking lot. She carried her MacBook under one arm and a box that someone from HR had packed while she was in the boardroom. Todd Bailey, the HR representative who'd stared at the ceiling during my termination, held the elevator door for her on the way down. He made eye contact this time. I was already in the operations center by then. Marcus was waiting. He'd been there all night. Looked like it. He handed me a coffee from the vending machine, the burnt kind that tastes like it was brewed during the previous administration, and said nothing. Didn't need to. I sat down at the console, logged in with my restored credentials at 7:51 a.m. The system was a mess. 14 hours of unmanaged load, shedding across 3 states. Cascading fault errors stacked up like traffic on I-35. The vendor's attempted patches had created secondary conflicts in the handshake protocols. It took me 11 hours. 11 hours of reading the grid the way I'd read it for 26 years. Patiently, looking for where the load was actually going. Marcus beside me, handing me data the way he used to hand me tools during ice storms. By 7 p.m. Wednesday, every customer in every state was back online. All 4.2 million homes. The following Monday, I sat in a conference room with Ellen Shaw and 2 outside attorneys representing the board. We negotiated for 4 hours. When I walked out, I had a signed retention package worth $38 million, an equity stake of 2.4%, making me the 3rd largest individual shareholder in Ridgewater Energy, and a salary of $374,000 per year. Double my prior salary of $187,000. I didn't post about it on LinkedIn. The cave drawing story hit the trade press within 72 hours of my reinstatement. Not because I talked, because someone on the board leaked the NERC filings, and once the industry press saw that a 26-year-old Kellogg MBA with 9 months of retail consulting experience had fired the only NERC certified system operator at a utility serving 4.2 million customers, the story wrote itself. Paige Drummond's LinkedIn profile went private 3 days later. Her last public post was still the one from Tuesday night. Tough decisions are part of real leadership. Growth requires letting go of what's comfortable. The comment section had 1,400 replies. I didn't read them. Hank Drummond stayed on in his advisory role. No operational authority. I see him at quarterly meetings. He sits in the back. He doesn't say much. I don't hold it against him. He built something real once. He just forgot that the people who keep real things running aren't interchangeable. 2 weeks after everything settled, Caleb drove down from College Station for the weekend. We sat on the back deck. I grilled steaks. The dog sat between us with his chin on Caleb's knee, which is what the dog does when he approves of someone. Caleb was quiet for a while, the way he gets when he's working up to something. He's studying electrical engineering. He chose that major before any of this happened, but I'd be lying if I said it doesn't mean something to me that he chose it at all. Dad. Yeah. Did you actually design all of that yourself? I looked out at the tree line. Same tree line. Same hawks circling. Same sky I'd watched from this deck the morning Paige locked me out, when I sat here with my coffee and did nothing, and did it on purpose. First draft was on notebook paper, I said. I still have it in my locker. He nodded. Didn't say anything else for a while. Didn't need to. We finished the steaks. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, the bottle I keep on the shelf above the fridge for nights that earn it. Caleb had a Coke. The dog fell asleep on the deck boards. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in a building isn't the person with the title or the degree or the mandate. It's the person who built the thing everyone else depends on, and who never needed you to know it. Because competence doesn't announce itself. It just keeps the lights on. And when you remove it, you find out exactly what it was worth, usually in the dark. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.